The story begins with Yijun kneeling in tears before his wife, Siwoo. He begs for her consent to a divorce, bowing to the floor in submission. Siwoo smirks, content with his humiliation, and agrees to the divorce. She sits relaxed in a chair, looking down at Yijun as he bows, even pushing him slightly with her foot. She coldly asks what he can offer her in return for the divorce. Yijun can barely hold back his tears, biting his lips to suppress his emotions. His life is falling apart, and the root of his problems is his family, particularly his despised father. All day long, the old man either drinks or gambles, raising his voice at his already adult son. After his mother's death, Yijun continued living with his father, as he was the only family Yijun had left. Despite this, the man paid no attention to his son. Yijun was forced to take multiple part-time jobs outside of his office work just to stay afloat. He even worked as a waiter in a diner to feed himself. One day, Yijun noticed a father and young son who entered the diner. The child was being naughty and accidentally spilled some water. The father turned to Yijun, asking for a towel or napkins. Despite the inconvenience, the father did not scold his son but instead took care of him. Yijun realized he was envious of such familial closeness, something he never experienced. At home, his father, once again drunk, asked Yijun to lend him 10 million won. Yijun was shocked by the request, as it was a large sum for him. He tried reasoning with his father, but the old man promised to return the money double. He talked about a new currency that was supposed to change the future, an investment he believed would pay off. Yijun replied that he valued his hard-earned money more than a dubious chance of making a fortune. However, his father would not hear any excuses. He admitted to always being a hopeless drunk who raised his hand against his son, but now he begged Yijun for one more chance to change. The father's desperation was so evident that tears came to his eyes. Despite his annoyance, Yijun could not refuse his father. He desperately wanted to save their relationship and make it a normal family again. He decided to trust his father one last time and lent him the money. The father thanked Yijun profusely, hugged him, and promised his son would not regret it. However, his joyful cries did little to inspire Yijun with hope for success, and for good reason. Soon, Yijun's last remaining relative left this world as well. His father died in a car accident, losing control in the rain and dying on the spot. Yijun held his father's funeral, and thoughts about the currency faded into the background. Though he felt sad about losing the last member of his family, he also felt a sense of freedom. Experiencing mixed emotions, he spent his time drinking, just as his father did not long ago. Left alone, he reflected on the strangeness of his life. One evening, while watching TV during dinner, Yijun saw an interview with a young man. Despite his age, the man had already achieved great success in the investment field. Yijun wondered whether the man's success involved buying a house or something similar. However, it turned out the discussion was about large assets amounting to 4 billion Korean won, which made Yijun cough in surprise. The host asked the young man what he had invested in, and the man revealed that he had chosen bitcoins, the same currency Yijun's father had mentioned. Yijun's mind raced as he connected the dots, realizing that the man on the screen had made a fortune doing something he himself had dismissed. He grabbed his phone, wanting to confirm what he had just heard, and downloaded an online wallet app. The host reflected on how profitable it would have been to invest in Bitcoin at the very beginning of its journey. The interviewee confidently stated that no one could have expected such a significant price increase, but if someone had invested when Yijun's father did, their investment would have grown 2,500 times. Yijun stared at his phone in disbelief. He had a massive amount of money in his account. He nearly fainted, unable to believe what he was seeing. The rise in the price of Bitcoin had driven many around the world crazy, and Yijun felt like he was barely holding on. His account now showed 25 billion won, a staggering 2,500 times more than his initial investment. Yijun spent the entire evening in shock, repeatedly checking his online wallet, unable to comprehend his newfound wealth. To clear his head, Yijun rides his bike down the street despite the cool weather. Even after a while, he still can't believe that he has more than 20 billion won in his account. At home, he can't stop checking the market price, which is changing at an incredible speed. Unable to decide whether to sell his assets now, he returns to his dilapidated house, torn by inner conflict. He thinks that, having been thrifty all his life, he should be able to be patient, but curiosity gets the better of him. Yijun decides to check his savings once again, praying in disbelief as sweat covers his brow. The amount has changed once more, and in the time he took to clear his head, his assets increased by another $2 million, bringing his total to 2 billion won. Despite his increased wealth, Yijun still goes to work at the office. During a meeting, the head of the department, to which Yijun belongs, discusses the company's possible customers. The employees discuss potential risks of collaborating with a clinic located in Busan. The department head suggests that someone from the group will need to be sent to Busan on a business trip. trip. Except for Yijun, no one volunteers. Everyone else averts their eyes. The department head tries to confirm if Yijun is sure, as he looks very tired, but Yijun, who has been spending all his time researching his assets, insists that everything is fine. The department head decides that Yijun will need someone to accompany him. Jinna, one of the most beautiful and popular girls in the company, volunteers to go with him. Yijun's colleagues look at Jinna, imagining spending time with her. Other male employees immediately start clamoring to join the business trip, but the boss decides that 2 people are enough, so Yijun and Jinna are chosen to go to Busan. The two travel by car to their destination to handle business matters. Jinna mentions that she loves driving the car her brother sold her last year. Busan is Jinna's hometown, and while she used to visit often, her workload and weekend sports activities have kept her too busy lately. They chat for a while, and Yijun wonders what to do with his life now that he has so much money. The trip takes place at a leisurely pace, and the conversation between Yijun and Jinna is pleasant. When they stop to take a break, Yijun buys Jinna a coffee. He is surprised that his colleagues are so eager to discuss work issues with Jinna, and she thanks him for his help. Jinna fidgets, embarrassed, and averts her eyes, her cheeks flushing. Finally, she gathers the courage to ask Yijun if he wants to go shopping with her in the evening. Jinna hasn't gone shopping in a long time and also has something she wants to talk about. Yijun thinks about her suggestion but decides it would be nice to distract himself, so he agrees. Later, the two of them go shopping. They start by visiting a clothing store to look at business suits. Yijun, who has lost the habit of shopping, wonders why he can't just order the same thing online at a better price. Jinna suddenly offers to help Yijun choose and buy a suit, surprising him with the offer. The clothes are a sort of bribe, as Jinna has an awkward request. Since Yijun has enough money for shopping, he demands that Jinna stop delaying the awkward conversation. Blushing deeply, Jinna carefully chooses her words and finally asks Yijun to pretend to be her boyfriend in front of her parents. He is stunned, but Jinna explains that her younger sister already has a partner, and their parents are pressuring Jinna to find someone. Blushing at the unexpected request, Yijun tries to process it but eventually agrees to help his colleague. That evening, they go to a restaurant where they meet Jinna's parents, who are very happy to meet their daughter's chosen one. They engage in polite conversation with Yijun, make jokes, and try to please him. They ask if the two work for the same company, and Yijun confirms it. Jinna's mother is curious about how they became friends, and Yijun explains that they grew close when he taught her the basics of their job. Satisfied with the answer, her parents continued the peaceful meal. Yijun recalls a very different dinner with his ex-wife's relatives, who were negative and aggressive towards him. They raised their voices, asked numerous questions about his parents, who had already passed away at that time, and bombarded him with questions about money and real estate. They pressured Yijun, making it clear that after the wedding, he would be expected to support them financially. He felt immense pressure and contempt from them, and his own opinions were of no interest to anyone. He failed to impress his ex-wife's relatives, but in stark contrast, Jinna's parents warmly accepted him, making him feel at peace. Jinna's mother asks if Yijun enjoyed the food, and he enthusiastically praises her cooking. The experience he shares during this fake date with Jinna is completely different from what he experienced in his previous marriage. After the meeting, they warmly say goodbye to Jinna's parents, who are pleased with the encounter. Jinna's mother subtly hints that she doesn't need to return home to spend the night. Yijun reflects that only his newfound wealth helped him avoid feeling uncomfortable that evening, as his ex-wife had once trampled on his confidence. As Jinna's mother laughs with the couple, she teases them, asking when they plan to give her a granddaughter. Embarrassed by such a warm welcome, Yijun feels a mixture of emotions, overhearing Jinna's parents discussing how he isn't bad for their daughter. After meeting Jinna's parents, Yijun and Jinna go for a walk on the beach. Jinna bows to Yijun in embarrassment and apologizes. She feels very awkward about the evening. Yijun immediately tries to calm her down, but Jinna mentions that she noticed his tense expression during her parents' questions. Yijun realizes that Jinna knows about his previous marriage and quickly reassures her, saying that her parents were kind and the food was delicious, so he wasn't offended. However, since Jinna still seems to regret the situation, he suggests smoothing things over by walking around some interesting places. Jinna immediately starts thinking about the best route, becoming so engrossed in planning that she walks ahead of Yijun. He calls out for her to slow down but then realizes that Jinna is just very focused on the task, chuckling as he remembers her mother's words about Jinna's stubbornness. Suddenly, Jinna's eyes catch something on the beach, and she has an idea. She points to a spot where she wants to take Yijun. As they approach, Yijun feels uncomfortable comfortable and grins nervously. It turns out Jinna is interested in a fortune teller's tent nearby. When they decide to get their fortunes told, Jinna receives a positive reading, with the fortune teller describing her as having good and pure energy. The fortune teller praises Jinna both as a colleague and as a person, making her very happy about her prospects in life. However, the fortune teller notes that Jinna recently missed an important opportunity and advises her to be braver and not hesitate in the future. Yijun listens to their conversation skeptically, as he doesn't believe in fortune telling. The fortune teller assures Jinna that she'll have another chance and needs to stay strong and attentive. Yijun can barely hold back a sigh at the fortune teller's words, but Jinna persuades him to participate as well, insisting that the fortune teller is trustworthy. Reluctantly, Yijun agrees, even though he doesn't have any specific questions. The fortune teller's intense gaze focuses on him, and the first thing she mentions is the hungry times he endured, which shocks him. Yijun is stunned that the fortune teller knows about the poverty he faced in his youth. However, she continues, telling Yijun that he has caught great luck, something she even envies. She advises him to travel the world and experience life to the fullest, assuring him that doing so will multiply his luck even more. She tells him that he can live as he wishes without looking back at the past, and that he will succeed. Jinna casually tries to find out how lucky Yijun is in his personal life, but he is lost in thought about the fortune teller's words and has no idea how to change his lifestyle. However, he is pleased to hear the positive predictions. When it comes time to pay for the fortune telling, Yijun is horrified by the large amount, even though he has hundreds of times more in his account. Despite this, they leave the fortune teller in high spirits. Jinna invites Yijun to eat some seafood with her at the market, taking the still thoughtful man by the jacket and leading him along. Yijun doesn't know what to expect from the future yet, but he's starting to feel interested in it. It takes the heroes 4 days to establish their work in Busan, after which they return from the business trip. Yijun returns to his abandoned apartment and immediately rushes to his computer to check the Bitcoin rate. At first, he is horrified that he didn't sell his assets sooner, as he lost 200 million won, but very soon, he earns 300 million won in an hour. He exhales with relief, but still doesn't understand what to do with his assets. Mentally exhausted from spending the entire weekend watching the Bitcoin rate, he is tormented by doubts about when to sell his assets and whether it's worth doing at all. When the weekend ends, Yijun returns to work at the office. During lunch, he listens to his colleagues discuss real estate investments. As a result, Yijun never gets a proper rest and isn't fully focused. Now, with 40 billion won in his account, he wonders if the price of Bitcoin can rise even higher. His colleagues curiously ask how his trip to Busan went with Jinna, and Yijun responds calmly. Older colleagues tease him lightheartedly about the trip, but Yijun remains composed. His colleagues return to discussing investments. The manager, whom Yijun assists, mentions that he is thinking about investing in Bitcoin, causing Yijun to shudder. The men reflect on how much they could have earned if they had invested earlier. They decide to study the potential of Bitcoin investment in detail. Conversations about cryptocurrency become more animated, and this time, Yijun focuses on the discussion. After hearing his colleagues, he decides that Bitcoin will continue to grow. This overwhelming greed consumes Yijun, making him want to wait and not sell his assets just yet. He continues to keenly monitor the changes in Bitcoin's market price. However, Yijun is shocked when the price of Bitcoin plummets, and he loses 6 billion won. During his next break at work, he steps outside to get some fresh air, but the lost money haunts him. Yijun struggles to come to terms with the fact that the amount he lost in waiting could have equaled 140 years of his salary. He immediately grabs his phone to check his assets, seized with excitement and pondering whether to urgently sell his Bitcoins. He tells himself there's no need to be greedy anymore. After all, he already has more than 30 billion won. Just then, Yijun is approached by his colleague, eager to find out what he's doing. Startled by the interruption, Yijun flinches. His colleague chuckles when he sees Yijun checking the Bitcoin rate and asks if he's thinking of investing. Yijun sweats nervously, trying to come up with an answer. His colleagues, noticing that he doesn't look well, assume he's having some trouble with his investments. Though he doesn't reveal the real amount, they still support him and wish him good luck. Yijun sighs heavily, torn over whether the price of Bitcoin will rise again. He asks his colleagues if they've seen the recent price collapse. The men exchange grins and shake their heads. Curious, Yijun presses them for the reason behind their smiles. One of his colleagues explains that he doesn't follow the news, showing Yijun the current Bitcoin rate. Yijun is completely speechless. The price has jumped up again, and quite significantly. Tears of relief well up in his eyes, and his colleagues rally around him, offering words of encouragement. They assure him that the real surge is just beginning. One of them even mentions that he bought Bitcoins and has already earned over 1 million won. However, Yijun remains terrified of another drop, though his colleague's confidence gives him hope that perhaps he can still wait. The very next day, there's a sharp spike in Bitcoin's price, shaking the global community. Suddenly, everyone is talking about cryptocurrency. Bitcoin is now being hailed as a store of value that surpasses gold. The following day, the cost of Bitcoin reaches an exorbitant figure, and Yijun's assets soar past 100 billion won. When Yijun sees the total amount, he becomes hysterical. His heart races, sweat pours down his face, and he struggles to breathe normally. All he can do is try to breathe calmly and steady himself. Yijun forces himself to calm down, reminding himself that this isn't his money until he sells his assets. Now, it's really time for him to make a decision. He can't postpone it any longer. Yijun is tormented by whether to sell everything or wait a little longer. Not used to handling such vast amounts of money, he's afraid of making the wrong move. Greed overwhelms him, convincing him that he could earn even more if he just waits. Dark thoughts creep into Yijun's mind, pushing him to chase after tens of billions without lifting a finger. As he succumbs to these thoughts, a memory of his father, who once assured him that everything would work out, flashes through his mind. Yijun looks at a framed picture of his father on the shelf. His father had believed that buying this new currency was his chance to become a better person and parent. When his father spent his time gambling, he always promised to buy Yijun new clothes and a bag if he won big. But his father had been putting off living his life all this time, and Yijun realizes that it's time for him to make a change. The next day, Jinna is actively working in the office, typing important documents. She stretches with pleasure to ease the stiffness from sitting still for a long time. Jinna notices that Yijun never showed up in the office after they returned. She approaches one of the managers and presents the results of her work, and he thanks her for her effort. The manager tells her that Yijun took a day off because he is not in the office. Jinna hopes that nothing serious happened to him. Meanwhile, Yijun finally leaves his house and goes shopping. His first destination is a car dealership. The salesperson asks if he has any specific wishes, and although Yijun feels uncomfortable, one car still catches his attention. A recently released white Ferrari model, perfect for both city driving and sports. Yijun decides to buy it, but when the salesperson starts discussing payment options, Yijun interrupts him, holding out a bank card and offering to pay immediately in full. The day before, Yijun sold his assets and earned $100 million, or 100 billion won. Now Yijun is young and rich, but he doesn't immediately know what to do with such a vast amount of money. He decides to buy girls first, a car first, and now has to wait for it to be delivered from the dealership. After spending what would have been an enormous sum by his previous standards, Yijun leaves the dealership. He is belatedly panicked that he has spent almost $500 million, but he realizes he has taken the first step toward fulfilling his dreams. Next on his list is the purchase of a luxury apartment. At the real estate agency, the employees actively welcome Yijun. He reveals that he needs a spacious apartment in a new building with a view of the Han River. This is typically very expensive property, so the agency's employees are very interested in such a client. Yijun and the realtor go to see one of the options, a very large, newly built complex. Living there will cost him 22 billion won. The realtor tells Yijun about the benefits of the complex, such as walking paths, gardens, a swimming pool, and a gym. The apartment they are viewing is on the 11th floor, and the realtor invites Yijun to follow him. As is common in many Korean apartments, the door opens with a key card. Stepping inside, Yijun feels overwhelmed by the size of the apartment. It's so large that he jokes about being able to go jogging inside. The realtor tells him that the apartment is fully furnished with high-quality materials. The realtor shows him 2 bathrooms, each larger than Yijun's current apartment. Yijun jokes about not having to worry about mosquitoes or noise, and the realtor agrees, noting the advantages of high-rise living. For Yijun, the apartment is so luxurious that he would be willing to live in less comfortable conditions. He opens a window and is speechless at the view of the river. It's so beautiful and impressive that he admires it out loud. The realtor asks for his opinion and offers to show other options, but Yijun is satisfied with this one. He tells the realtor that he'll take it. The real estate agency prepares the contract, which Yijun signs immediately. He is then asked to pay an initial fee and a brokerage commission for the transaction. Yijun takes out the suitcase he brought with him and replies that he will pay the entire amount up front. He opens the suitcase, clarifying that the payment will be in cash. The real estate agents are horrified at the sight of so much cash, but Yijun asks them to provide a receipt for the brokerage fee. Meanwhile, in the office where Yijun works, Hanjo is flirting with a colleague in the pantry. He had taken her to a restaurant the day before and is now suggesting a better place. Hanjo grins as he flirts, and the girl responds to his advances. Suddenly, their interaction is interrupted by Jinna bursting into the pantry. She quickly approaches Hanjo, waiting for his girlfriend to step back. Jinna steps closer, almost closing the distance between them, wanting to discuss something important. Hanjo is stunned by such an approach and doesn't understand what Jinna could want from him. him. She looks at him menacingly and asks if he knows where Yijun lives. Hanjo doesn't understand why a popular girl like Jinna would need Yijun's address. Jinna replies that she wants to visit him because she's worried about his long absence from work. Hanjo wonders if Jinna is this concerned about all her colleagues, but he doesn't know where Yijun lives either. However, he offers to call Yijun and ask. He contacts Yijun via messenger, and Yijun agrees to give them his address. Watching Jinna's eager reaction, Hanjo wonders if she's interested in his senior colleague. As he watches her, Jinna almost hums with joy at the thought of the upcoming meeting. After a day's work, Jinna and Hanjo decide to buy Yijun some gifts and visit his house. Jinna, curious about what Yijun's home might be like, imagines that he lives in a small, neat, and clean apartment since he lives alone. Hanjo also tries to envision Yijun's place, thinking it must be minimally furnished, given that Yijun probably still lives where he lived before his marriage. When they arrive in the neighborhood where Yijun lives, it doesn't look the way they expected. Once inside the apartment, Hanjo and Jinna recoil in shock and horror. Yijun thanks them for coming and apologizes for having to hide behind the excuse of feeling unwell at work. The apartment is far dirtier and mustier than they imagined. However, Yijun doesn't seem concerned about the untidiness. As he is preparing to move, Hanjo winces in horror, noting that the apartment looks more like a warehouse than a home and has a strong odor. Yijun explains that the smell is due to a nearby sewer leak. Jinna touches the wall, which is covered in black mold, and tears well up in her eyes at the thought of Yijun living alone in such conditions. Hanjo notices Jinna trembling with emotion and decides to help Yijun with the move and start packing boxes. Jinna supports the idea, and Yijun, grateful for their concern and assistance, clarifies if they're sure they want to help, as they might get dirty. They reassure him that it's nothing. As they head to the parking lot, Hanjo is surprised to see a Ferrari. His attention is immediately drawn to the latest model of the car. He wonders what such a luxurious vehicle is doing in this place. Hanjo wants to take a closer look but feels embarrassed in front of his colleagues. Noticing Hanjo's interest, Yijun calmly approaches the Ferrari and suggests they load the boxes into it. Hanjo and Jinna are speechless at the unexpected offer. Initially, Hanjo thinks Yijun rented the car for the move, but when Yijun says it's his, Hanjo breaks into a cold sweat from the shock. The two can only think that Yijun must have inherited a fortune, as they can't imagine where else he would get the money for a car worth 400 million won. Hanjo, however, can only focus on how much he wants to ride in it. Yijun suggests that his colleagues check out the apartment he's moving to. Hanjo and Jinna eagerly agree, curious to see Yijun's new residence. However, there is only one passenger seat in the Ferrari, meaning only one of them can ride with him. Jinna assumes she'll have to go separately because she's the youngest, but just as she's about to offer, Hanjo surprises her by saying he'll go separately instead. Jinna is taken aback by Hanjo's offer, but he explains that he still needs to pick up his car. He walks to his car, promising to follow Yijun and Jinna. As he leaves, Hanjo cries a little, wishing he could ride in the Ferrari too, but he made this decision to let Jinna spend time with the one she likes. As Yijun and Jinna drive off, Yijun remarks that it's the first time they've been alone together since the trip to Busan. Jinna reveals that her parents thought Yijun was the man she planned to marry soon. In response, Yijun teases her, asking if he should play the role of her husband, which causes Jinna to blush deeply. Embarrassed, Jinna isn't sure how to talk about what's on her mind. Yijun notices her awkwardness and chuckles kindly. Jinna brushes it off, not wanting to spoil the moment with difficult questions, even though she's curious to know more about Yijun's ex-wife. Yijun thanks her for the sensitivity and care that she and Hanjo have shown without prying too much. Blushing, Jinna responds that she'll definitely ask questions when Yijun is ready. She tries to find out where he's moving, but Yijun keeps the details a mystery. Meanwhile, there's a phone conversation between the company director and an unknown woman. The woman says she's sorting through old things and looks at some photos. One of these photos depicts Siwoo and Yijun at their wedding. The woman's fingers aggressively crumple the photo as she speaks on the phone. It turns out to be Siwoo herself, Yijun's ex-wife. 6 months after their divorce, Siwoo decides to return to work at the office where Yijun works. Back in the Ferrari, Yijun's new car races through the streets, sparkling with cleanliness. This time, Hanjo is driving, having been allowed to do so by Yijun, and he is so happy that he's crying. Yijun asks him to be careful, jokingly warning him not to kill them both, but Hanjo is too elated to listen. Hanjo has a question for Yijun and asks if he can ask it. Yijun, surprised, agrees. Hanjo then asks how Yijun feels about about Jinna. Yijun doesn't understand why Hanjo is asking such a sudden question, but Hanjo insists he's just curious. Yijun doesn't sense any hidden motives and reflects on how Jinna is kind, capable, and cares about others, a good person overall. Hanjo tries to find out if that's all Yijun feels, but Yijun isn't sure what else Hanjo wants to hear. At work, senior colleagues start bombarding Yijun with questions about his new car during breaks. Everyone noticed the Ferrari in the parking lot and assumed that Yijun had made a fortune from his investments. Yijun explains that he increased his capital by reinvesting his earnings and mortgaging his property. His colleagues, on the other hand, lost some of their money on bitcoins, so they turned to Yijun for advice as a more successful investor. They believe that Yijun must be an expert on investments and that he has new plans in mind. However, Yijun is unsure what to tell them, whether to create a cover story or reveal the whole truth. He eventually tells them that to invest successfully, you need to have the heart of a beast. Though this advice confuses his colleagues, they interpret it in their own way, deciding that psychology, not technique, is the key to investing. The manager then asks if Yijun invests in other types of cryptocurrencies. After buying a house and a car, Yijun reinvested the rest of his assets in cryptocurrency, including Ripple and Ethereum. He's hesitant to give investment advice, fearing responsibility for the outcomes. Yijun chose these cryptocurrencies because Ripple supports international transactions between banks, and Ethereum uses blockchain technology. He believes both will attract media and investor attention, having studied the subject seriously. Meanwhile, Jinna cleans the women's restroom, thinking of Yijun. She overhears other women gossiping about Yijun and his new Ferrari. They speculate that he must have taken out loans or is involved in gambling and drinking. One woman expresses disappointment, having thought Yijun was more respectable. Annoyed by the slander, Jinna approaches the group, radiating a dark and threatening energy, and demands to know who's spreading the rumors. The women are startled by her sudden intervention. At the same time, Yijun's ex-wife, Siwoo, comes to the office where he works. She asks the manager about Yijun, but the manager tries to dissuade her, offering to pass along the message instead. Just then, Yijun enters with boxes full of documents. As the boxes tilt, Siwoo catches them, and Yijun thanks her, only to realize who she is. Panic washes over him as he recognizes his ex-wife. Siwoo warns him to be more careful in the office and asks how he's doing, but Yijun doesn't trust her, recalling painful memories of their honeymoon when she scolded him for booking a hotel that didn't suit her. Throughout their marriage, Siwoo belittled him, making him feel guilty, and convinced him that he was lucky she married him. Siwoo believes she still has control over Yijun, but he's no longer the man he used to be. Even though their meeting rattles him, he remains calm. Siwoo says she has some documents to give him, and with a long sigh, Yijun slams the boxes on the floor, startling her. Colleagues turn to see what's happening as Yijun, with newfound confidence, takes the documents from Siwoo and leaves, pretending the encounter didn't affect him. Siwoo is enraged by his reaction, biting her lips to suppress her anger in front of his colleagues. She leaves the office, fuming over how much Yijun has changed since their divorce. She regrets not staying with him longer to claim the Ferrari and is determined to create another opportunity. Siwoo returns to her office in tears, looking miserable. Her colleagues rush to comfort her, but the head of the department sees through her act, sighing at Siwoo's pretense. Yijun, meanwhile, quietly works in his office, reflecting on the encounter. He knew Siwoo would return to work eventually, and while he wondered how he would feel when they met again, it wasn't as bad as he feared. The manager approaches Yijun and asks if he's okay, then invites him to the rooftop. There, the manager hugs him, thanking Yijun for the investment advice that led to a significant profit. Yijun is confused until he checks the cryptocurrency quotes and discovers that Ripple has risen by 70% since the morning. He wonders how much his assets are worth now, calculating that he has about $98 million. His colleagues, who also invested in Ripple, earned several years' worth of salaries. They thank Yijun, but he insists that their success is their own responsibility. When asked how much he invested in Ripple, Yijun, not wanting to reveal the truth, claims he invested $1 billion in Ripple and Ethereum. Everyone is shocked at how much he invested and earned. Rumors quickly spread throughout the company that Yijun hit the jackpot with cryptocurrency. His success at such a young age becomes the talk of the office, with people noting how his colleagues are also making successful investments by following his lead. However, someone has been spreading bad rumors about Yijun, claiming he beat his ex-wife and took money from her. Siwoo overhears his colleagues discussing how someone is trying to smear Yijun's reputation and is furious that her plan is failing and people are defending Yijun instead of condemning him. Frustrated, she almost reveals her presence but quickly leaves, leaving only a crumpled drink cup behind. Lunchtime arrives. arrives, and Jinna sits thoughtfully by the window in a cafe, looking out as if waiting for someone. The men in the cafe openly admire her, but she seems nervous and agitated, her face pale. Hanjo enters the cafe, carrying a tray with the drinks. He calls Jinna by name and asks how long she's been waiting, but she says she just arrived. Hanjo had asked her to meet him at the cafe to discuss something special about Yijun. He wants to ask her a question first and then talk about the rest. Hanjo asks Jinna what she thinks about the recent rumors concerning Yijun's gambling addiction and alleged abuse of his ex-wife. Jinna sharply exclaims that all these rumors are ridiculous, and she doesn't believe them at all. Someone is spreading them maliciously. This answer satisfies Hanjo, and he decides to clarify something else with her. Finally, Hanjo asks Jinna if she's in love with Yijun. This causes Jinna to blush profusely and become speechless with embarrassment. She stammers, trying to deny Hanjo's words, but he chuckles and asks her not to pretend. He understands everything and wants to help. Hanjo tells her to go to Yijun right now and confess her feelings. Meanwhile, Yijun is on another break, receiving hugs from satisfied colleagues. Trusting Yijun's instincts, his colleagues decided to hold off on selling their assets and didn't lose out. Yijun isn't entirely happy, as more and more people are thanking him. Colleagues began to express their gratitude because, thanks to Yijun's advice, they managed to solve their financial difficulties. After the rumors about Yijun hitting the jackpot, most of the company's employees got involved in the cryptocurrency game. Soon, everyone who trusted Yijun and invested in Ripple made a huge profit. Colleagues start calling Yijun a financial god and confess their admiration for him. One colleague tries to figure out how much Yijun has earned, but he tries to avoid revealing the truth. Currently, Yijun has 578 billion won in his account. With that kind of money, he could buy almost any company. When Yijun invested in new cryptocurrencies, he anticipated their prices would rise, but he couldn't have imagined the situation would become so crazy within a month. He counted on human greed, but the growth is still too rapid. The women in the office also join their colleagues in seeking investment advice from Yijun. He warns them that it's a bit risky to invest right now, as the prices have skyrocketed recently and could drop significantly. The women thank him for the advice and ask about other investment opportunities. Siwoo is infuriated by the attention Yijun is receiving. Out of irritation, she locks herself in the bathroom and kicks the trash can. Siwoo is angry that everyone praises someone she believes is a fool. Her pride is hurt, and she devises a plan to destroy Yijun's reputation and get his money. Yijun, on the other hand, calmly checks his phone, seeing that everyone is discussing cryptocurrency. However, he suddenly receives a notification that shocks him. Siwoo writes to him as if nothing happened between them, saying she was wrong and asking him out on a date. Yijun considers deleting the message, but then Jinna calls him. He immediately answers, curious about the reason for her call. Jinna, worried, says nothing special happened. She's just at home in her pajamas, hugging a plush toy, and wanted to talk to him. Yijun asks if Jinna is resting, and she replies that she just got back from training. Yijun mentions his plans to go shopping the next day since he threw away his old furniture. Jinna eagerly offers to join him on the shopping trip. Yijun hesitates to answer, making Jinna anxious, but after a few seconds, he agrees to meet her at the mall in the afternoon. They wish each other goodnight, and Jinna screams in delight into her pillow, trying to calm herself. At the wrong time, she remembers her conversation with Hanjo and how he urged her to confess. Jinna isn't sure if she'll be able to do it, but she's determined to try. The next day, Yijun hurries to the mall, arriving early and sighing heavily as he waits for Jinna. He considers waiting at a cafe, but then Jinna calls out to him. She also arrived early, eager to see Yijun. She's beaming with joy, and the men around them can't help but notice. Yijun observes that Jinna is calling him informally, which he allows her to do at work as well. Jinna then invites him to go inside the mall, secretly admiring him. She's thrilled that Yijun agreed to take her on this outing. The two of them start shopping for the furniture Yijun needs. Meanwhile, Siwoo is waiting for Yijun in a cafe, fuming that he's late, not realizing he has no plans to show up. Back at the mall, the employees politely greet Yijun and Jinna. Jinna notices that this is the first time she's alone with Yijun outside of work and imagines it could be a date. Suddenly, Yijun draws her attention to something, inviting her to take a look. He's excited about finding new blankets, especially soft ones, as he's used to only thick and heavy blankets. Enthusiastically, he decides to buy 3 sets of blankets at once. Before he can make the purchase, something else catches his eye. A new cordless vacuum cleaner. Then, there's a refrigerator with a touch screen on the door. He also spots a washer and dryer, important elements for his new home. Lastly, Yijun is drawn to a sofa with an adjustable recline angle. For the first time in his life, Yijun spends money without thinking, and this makes him happy. He admits that the mall is an interesting place when you're rich. Yijun feels like he's turned on a cheat code in a game, like when he was a child. He decides to ask Jinna if she's bored with going shopping with him, but she is delighted. However, in addition to the fun, Jinna feels many other strange emotions, mainly because of Hanjo's words that she is obliged to confess her feelings to Yijun. She understands that she really can't hesitate forever and wants to try to tell Yijun everything. But when she begins to confess, Yijun interrupts her. They both shudder with embarrassment and look into each other's eyes. Jinna suggests that Yijun speak first, but he insists that she go ahead. However, she still persuades him to speak first. Yijun's words make Jinna stare at him in surprise. She even asks if Yijun really means what he said. All this time, sitting in a cafe waiting for Yijun, Siwoo clenches her fists in fury because he did not come to the meeting. During the next break at work, the office employees rejoice at the rise in Ripple's value. The men cheer loudly for themselves and each other. Yijun observes the scene, noting that even more people are now investing in cryptocurrency. One of the loudest cheerers is a man who used to ridicule cryptocurrency, calling it a form of gambling. However, in addition to the rise in Ripple, the price of Ethereum is also soaring, which makes Yijun very happy. He thinks that huge profits from cryptocurrency can turn even those who criticized it into fanatics. Greed, according to Yijun, unites people, but no one knows the end result. In happy moments, investments can bring huge profits, but if the price falls, a person can lose everything. And when the losses begin, you end up in a personal hell. Yijun admits that he is no exception and has to obey these rules as well. Even his father taught him that winning at the gaming table doesn't mean getting money. Money can come at a completely different point in time. Yijun believes that one must overcome greed and wake up because you only get money when you get up from the gaming table. In work chats, they discuss investments and thank Yijun for his valuable advice. This infuriates his colleague, James, who has long considered cryptocurrency an unworthy business. James believes that Yijun is just lucky and doesn't really understand anything. James is convinced that he is the only one engaged in real investing. He is pleased that he earned 100 million won in a month and believes his life will soon turn upside down. James dreams of buying a luxury apartment overlooking the Han River and a sports car. James also wants to marry Jinna, with whom he has been in love for a long time. In the chat, Yijun makes an important statement about cryptocurrency. He says that he is going to sell everything. A senior colleague thinks this is foolish because Yijun could earn much more. James aggressively types messages in the chat, declaring that Yijun's words are complete nonsense, and no one should sell cryptocurrency now. James believes that if Yijun decides to miss out on such a benefit, then he is a complete amateur. Yijun replies to some of the messages, but he doesn't try to persuade anyone. After that, he puts his phone aside and thinks about his next step. Now, he wants to meet with his boss to discuss an important issue. Yijun goes to work in an office that is in the mood for a serious conversation. He goes up to the right floor and approaches his manager, asking if the manager has a minute to talk. The manager notices a roll of paper in Yijun's hands and realizes that Yijun wants to tell him something really important. Sighing heavily, he thinks that the conversation will be about a resignation, so he invites Yijun to go to another place, the roof, where they usually take breaks. The manager congratulates Yijun on his increased wealth. After all, Yijun had been rich before, and now he is supposed to be even richer, and the manager himself earned enough for drinking for the rest of his life. He decides to push Yijun to talk about what's on his mind. Yijun nervously clutches the papers in his hands and starts the conversation. The manager doesn't want to say goodbye to a good employee who also gives sound advice. Yijun then asks for a 2-week vacation and asks if it's possible to take it. The news that the application in Yijun's hands is for a vacation and not for a resignation pleases the manager. The manager had thought that since Yijun made so much money, he might be ready to retire, but Yijun isn't ready for that yet. He hadn't even thought of resigning. He recalls his meeting with Jinna, telling her that he planned to go to the States for about 2 weeks. He thinks about what to do with the money he's earned and decides that he needs to gain more experience and knowledge. Yijun wants to take the opportunity to study a little in America. Because of his decision, Jinna is hesitant to confess her feelings to him and only wishes Yijun a good time on the trip. The manager agrees to sign sign Yijun's vacation papers. Yijun asks his senior colleague if he can continue to live like this. He has made a lot of money from cryptocurrency, but he doesn't know what to do next. He doesn't have a hobby or a dream because he never had time to think about it before. Yijun realizes that he has always been jealous of people who have dreams, those who pursued singing professionally and enjoyed being on stage, those who were involved in sports from a young age and built their careers on it, and those who spent their time painting. These people had dreams and passions that he didn't have. The manager says that not everyone can have a dream, and not having one is as normal as being an ordinary person. Yijun had never thought about it that way and didn't know that it could be normal. The manager shares that, as a child, he dreamed of becoming a professional golfer. His parents, who loved golf, supported him, and from the age of 10, he was preparing to become a professional with their encouragement. He had injured himself more than once, and his hands were covered with bruises and calluses. But as a child, it was enough for him just to hold a club in his hands, and he was happy because of his dream. However, he soon discovered the hidden costs behind that dream. He learned that a lot of money had been spent on tuition and use of the golf course, which was ruining his family. As a result, he gave up on his dream. But now, he lives quite well and has another dream that he strives to make come true, to go to a baseball game with his family. He advises Yijun not to get too hung up on having a dream. He'll be able to get everything he wants in life. The manager suggests that Yijun enjoy life and do what he wants. Yijun respectfully listens to his senior colleague's words and draws conclusions for himself. He decides to move step by step to formulate new dreams. The manager, still curious, finally asks Yijun how much money he actually earned. He promises to keep the information secret. Instead of answering directly, Yijun asks how much an apartment in the Gangnam district costs nowadays. After mentally calculating, he whispers the final number in the manager's ear. The manager is so shocked by the answer that he breaks out in a sweat. He incredulously asks if Yijun really has such wealth. The manager smiles, amazed at how ridiculously rich Yijun is, realizing that Yijun's current assets could be imagined as 1,000 apartments in Gangnam. After receiving his vacation, Yijun sets off on his journey to America. The last time he flew was for a seminar in Germany, but that was a long time ago. Now, he can afford comfortable conditions for the flight. He is warmly greeted by the flight attendant, and Yijun is delighted by the respectful treatment. He has only flown in economy class before, where it was cramped and uncomfortable. Now, for the first time, he flies first class, sitting in a comfortable chair where he can relax. Suddenly, he hears a woman's voice discussing design issues nearby. In the next row sits a beautiful brunette talking on the phone about the development of the automotive industry in Korea. The girl notices Yijun watching her without any embarrassment. He waves at her as a sign of greeting. His neighbor ends her business conversation with a request to send documents by email in case of urgency, and apologizes to Yijun for talking on the phone in the cabin. But the man is understanding. After studying Yijun with her eyes, the stranger finds him quite amusing. She hands Yijun a business card and introduces herself as the executive director of an automobile company. Her name is Sophia. Yijun is surprised that Sophia is so young and already an executive director. He introduces himself to her but mentions that he didn't bring business cards. Sophia is puzzled by his position, as she didn't think an ordinary employee could afford to travel first class. Yijun almost immediately explains that his capital mainly depends on investments. On the plane, Yijun and Sophia are served a great lunch, steak and wine. In Yijun's eyes, the food literally glows, and his mouth waters in anticipation. He cuts a juicy steak with a knife and takes a bite. The taste of the dish shocks him from the first bite. Yijun has never eaten something so delicious. He squeezes his eyes shut with pleasure, delighted with the combination of meat juices and sauce. He also enjoys the wine, and overall, the meal is a pleasant surprise for him. As Sophia eats her portion quite calmly, Yijun wonders if he can ask for more wine. Sophia still doesn't understand where an ordinary employee gets the money to fly first class. Yijun notices that his neighbor is watching him very carefully. Their eyes meet, and Sophia feels uneasy that her surveillance has been discovered. Yijun unexpectedly compliments her on her good posture, which surprises Sophia. He says that he was watching her because of her confident posture and her skillful handling of a fork and knife. Sophia is very embarrassed by such detailed compliments, but she quickly calms down and is pleased by the attention. Yijun examines an image of a beautiful girl standing next to a car. It's part of a concept for a car ad for the company Sophia runs, and he finds it interesting. The girl enthusiastically explains that they create cars for both the Korean and American markets, and wonders what kind of car Yijun himself drives. When she learns that he owns a Ferrari, she becomes even more curious about who her neighbor really is. Meanwhile, Sophia talks about her plans for sports and electronic cars. Yijun remembers remembers that he has driven cars from her company before. The girl is very interested in hearing his feedback, but when he criticizes some technical features, she feels awkward. Apparently, Sophia did not expect such detailed comments about the shortcomings. Yijun notices how much he has changed, realizing that he would not have expressed his thoughts so boldly before. He reflects on the confidence that his money has given him. To diffuse the situation, he remarks that Sophia seems to have a great passion for cars, and she responds that it has been her hobby since childhood. She loves driving different cars, and in the UK, she recently had an interesting experience with a Mini. Sophia actively talks about her impressions, and Yijun thinks about how nice it is to see someone who is passionate about their work. However, throughout the flight, Sophia repeatedly bombards him with various information about cars. Yijun, unable to rest from her chatter during the flight, is very relieved to arrive at San Francisco Airport. He and Sophia shake hands, and she asks him to contact her when he returns to Korea. Sophia smiles and wishes Yijun a good trip. Pretty exhausted, Yijun wishes her all the best in return. After taking his luggage, he finally leaves the San Francisco airport. He finds himself in an unfamiliar environment and opens his mouth in surprise, looking at people of different races and with different skin colors. He finally realizes that he is really in America. Suddenly, someone behind him loudly calls out his name. Yijun turns around and sees Han Sha, his old friend, running towards him. The men shake hands and joke with each other. Han Sha is Yijun's closest friend, who shared all the hardships with him when they lived together during college. After that, Han Sha managed to move to the States and settle down here, and America has changed him quite a lot. Han Sha invites Yijun to lunch, and Yijun is surprised when Han Sha manages to book a table, to which Han Sha laughs, saying that you have to eat hamburgers in America. Meanwhile, in Korea, Siwoo tries to calm her anger at dinner, aggressively stabbing her salad with a fork. She is furious that Yijun is not only ignoring her but also managing to cheat on her. She almost growls, upset that she had to give up her pride and write to her ex-husband, whom she despises. When colleagues ask her what happened, Siwoo jokes that she is just thinking about her ex-husband. She then immediately starts saying the worst things she can think of about Yijun, intertwining stories of gambling debts, infidelity, and domestic violence. However, she is immediately interrupted by a manager from her department, who points out that Siwoo is the one paying too much attention to Yijun. The manager smirks, noting with surprise that if she broke up with someone, the story would end there. She hints to their colleagues that they shouldn't trust Siwoo's words, and Siwoo nearly explodes from the insinuation. The manager adds that she tried to stay out of their personal lives before, but the rumors Siwoo spreads don't match up with Yijun's reputation within the company. She openly accuses Siwoo of being jealous and trying to ruin Yijun's life. Siwoo is initially speechless from such a rebuff and doesn't know how to respond. However, her acting abilities kick in, and she immediately starts crying loudly, rushing out of the office. The manager rolls her eyes at this behavior and sighs. In a rage, Siwoo runs into the women's restroom to avoid screaming in the office. She kicks a trash can and curses the manager, but she decides to ignore it and endure the situation further. Siwoo also got caught up in the fever for buying Ripple and managed to make good money on it. She is certain that she will get very rich and have the last laugh. Meanwhile, Yijun's colleague, who was the loudest about not selling Ripple, brags at lunchtime that he was right. He mocks Yijun's skills, calling him cowardly for not making more money. James convinces his colleagues not to sell but to buy more Ripple and tells them to trust him. Colleagues from Yijun's office watch Jack's outburst from the sidelines. One of them, who was worried when Yijun sold his assets, doesn't know what to do next as profits continue to grow. He struggles with greed all day long, thinking about investments as the quotes rise. In response, the manager calmly declares that he sold all the Ripple he had in his assets. This shocks his colleague, since investments are bringing huge profits every day, but the manager simply shrugs, explaining that he trusts Yijun, who took the bold step of selling. In response to the younger colleague's suspicious look, he philosophically notes that cryptocurrency will continue to grow regardless of people's actions, and you can always buy more. But selling assets that are increasing in value at the right time requires skill, so when Yijun said he was selling all of his assets, the manager felt confident to do the same. Meanwhile, in San Francisco, Yijun and Han Sha are sitting in a burger joint when a cute waitress brings them their order. Yijun really enjoys the burgers from the first bite, and Han Sha is pleased with his reaction. Han Sha sympathizes with Yijun's expensive trip but promises to make his stay as comfortable as possible. Yijun is touched that his friend is willing to take care of him, even though he knows nothing about Yijun's financial situation. Suddenly, someone calls out to them while they're having lunch, and Han Sha turns toward the source of the sound. They are approached by a guy and a girl of non-Asian appearance, both blonde and speaking English without an accent. In America, Han Sha is sometimes called by his nickname, but he doesn't mind, as it sounds cool. The newcomers are Henry and Elena, and Han Sha became friends with them after moving to the States. They sit down to eat together and discuss Hensha's work projects, which have made a significant contribution to the automotive industry. Han Sha developed software for self-driving cars, while Henry is the founder of a startup in this field, working on an autonomous driving system for trucks. Elena also has her own startup company, designing and manufacturing clothes and shoes from environmentally friendly materials. Yijun is delighted that both of his new acquaintances are CEOs, and they discuss how opening a startup is like climbing a snow-capped mountain, trying to implement your idea by any means and overcoming obstacles of varying complexity. But when the idea finally takes shape, it feels like it was all worth it. Yijun admits that he respects Henry and Elena very much for their courage, looking at them with admiration. Henry replies that ideas are good, but they need talented people like Han Sha to bring them to life, as his programming skills can implement any concept. However, he immediately teases Han Sha, noting his great love for hamburgers. Watching their playful banter, Yijun is pleased to note that even though he has just arrived in America, he's already met the founders of promising companies. He feels that his trip to the States is already justified by such an interesting experience. In the evening, they arrive at Hensha's apartment, located in an ordinary apartment building. It's clean and well-furnished, which surprises Yijun, who learns that the rent for such housing is about 4 million won, or a little more than $3,000. Han Sha explains that real estate in the United States is more expensive than in Korea, especially in San Francisco. He opens the refrigerator and throws a can of beer to Yijun, suggesting they rinse their mouths after eating and discuss Yijun's plans for the trip. Han Sha knows his friend too well to understand that Yijun wouldn't come to the States without a reason. Yijun smiles contentedly, glad that his friend still understands him well. As they sip beer, the men discuss what has happened during the years of their separation. Han Sha is very happy about Yijun's divorce from Siwoo, whom he never liked. Yijun regrets going through the experience, but Han Sha notes that it made him stronger. Han Sha is glad that his friend has become more confident. He mentions that in America, many have hit the jackpot with cryptocurrency, and some even create it themselves to enrich themselves. Han Sha suggests that Yijun create his own cryptocurrency, and Yijun becomes interested in the idea. However, Yijun has another plan and asks Han Sha for help. Han Sha is curious about how he can support his old friend. Yijun reveals that he wants to start his own company. Han Sha initially thinks this idea came from too much drinking, but Yijun became seriously interested in starting his own company after meeting Henry and Elena. To explain the potential pitfalls, Han Sha talks about 3 important components of startups. The first component is capital, that is, cash and other assets. The second is a unique idea that would make the startup stand out in the market, and the third is the abilities of the creator and representative of the startup. Even with money and an idea, the director can destroy the project without the ability to manage it, and vice versa. Having abilities but lacking initial capital can lead to failure. Yijun reflects on what qualities a CEO needs, considering whether they include professionalism, intelligence, and energy. According to Han Sha, it's not easy to run a company, and if you have money, it's better to invest it wisely. His friend's words make Yijun reconsider his life strategy, and he decides to ask Han Sha how to invest in companies correctly. After a detailed discussion of all the intricacies, the next day, Yijun and Han Sha set up a business meeting at a burger joint. They invite Henry, whom Yijun recognizes from the day before. During the conversation, Henry learns that Yijun has decided to invest in his startup. The men laugh at the fact that choosing a burger restaurant as a place for a business meeting is a definite American decision. They discuss Henry's startup, and Yijun gathers all the information he needs. It turns out that the company has high growth and technological capabilities and has already received an investment offer from a large Korean corporation. Henry tries to insist that they have many offers, but Yijun believes he is actually hesitant. Such an observation surprises the American, and he stutters at Yijun's words. Companies interested in Henry's startup demand good terms for themselves, but unfair ones for Henry. Yijun, on the other hand, wants to partner with the startup, not absorb it. His initial offer to buy 10% of the shares for $500,000 shocks the American. Offering his investment terms, Yijun seems confident in his capabilities. After listening to him, Henry wants to check the paperwork first to make sure Yijun can afford the investment at this time. Han Sha is eating burgers quite calmly, confident in the success of the deal. Henry carefully examines the papers, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. As a result, he offers to sell Yijun 10% of the shares for $700,000. Han Sha immediately jumps into the conversation and asks Henry not to inflate the price because he originally wanted $400,000. When Henry asks him not to interfere with the negotiations, Han Sha points out that he was the one who advised Yijun to invest in his friend's startup. He makes his offer of 20% of the shares for $900,000. Han Sha knows very well that due to the development of new technology, Henry has an acute shortage of capital. A large Korean company wants to take over his startup, and if they don't come to an agreement, Henry will simply lose the right to run his business. He assures his American friend that Yijun will not do the same. He will take part of the shares as part of a fair investment deal and will not interfere in the management of the company. Therefore, he recommends that Henry carefully consider their offer and see a great benefit in it. Henry swallows nervously in response to his words but realizes that he has no choice. He holds out his hand to Yijun for a shake and announces that they are now partners. Yijun, as an investor, will look forward to the company's growth. When they go outside and he looks at the signed papers, he thinks that regardless of the results, this is a good experience. He is very grateful to Han Sha for his help and support in a new business for him. Han Sha's knowledge is much more extensive than he expected, and he is well versed in the internal affairs of companies. Therefore, Yijun decides to repay him for the opportunity. He talks about his strong love for his friend, but Han Sha only brushes it off in embarrassment. Yijun asks him to recommend a few more companies to invest in. Han Sha laughs that he can't stop thinking about work, and Yijun really thinks about how things are in the office. Meanwhile, Sophia, who was on a plane with Yijun, learns that an American startup has rejected their investment offer. It turns out that it was her company that wanted to absorb Henry's business. An employee of her company reports that their plan failed. The girl is stunned that Henry sold the shares to a new investor. But Henry is not the only one, as several other companies preferred to work with a private investor rather than with Sophia's company. The girl frowns upon hearing that this unknown investor is one person. Usually, she is more perceptive, but here she managed not to know some major player in the investment market. She orders her employee to find out as much as possible about this investor in order to buy his shares. Now Sophia's goal is to find her rival, but she does not yet suspect that Yijun is it. At the same time, around the world, the price of Ripple begins to fall at a tremendous speed. This drop is actively discussed in Yijun's work chats. Everyone is in a panic. Yijun's colleagues begin to blame James, who persuaded them to invest in Ripple, for their financial losses. The fact that his colleagues urge him to take responsibility makes James feel pressured. Many of the company's employees lost several million in 1 week. This altercation is watched in horror by Siwoo, who also suffered heavy losses, although she boasted so much that she was more successful than Yijun. James immediately starts yelling at the others that they shouldn't have blindly believed his words and that they are to blame for their losses. Everyone is very disappointed in him since the man was very active in forcing everyone to refuse to sell cryptocurrency. One of his colleagues grabs him by the collar and shakes him properly, starting a scuffle. One of the colleagues, who didn't believe Yijun's words and didn't sell the cryptocurrency on time, feels bitter about the defeat. He looks thoughtfully at the sky, trying not to despair from what is happening. He regrets that he succumbed to a fit of greed and did not listen to the advice of his friend. He decides to sell all his assets now while there is at least some chance to make money and not completely fall into despair. He sighs dreamily, curious about what Yijun is doing while they are going through difficult times. At the same time, Yijun is hiding in a destroyed building, reloading his pistol. He is covered in sweat and dust, breathing heavily and listening to the footsteps outside. There are several such buildings on a large territory, so he hopes that he will not be found immediately. But the enemies are close, and he is forced to open fire to protect himself. He yells at Han Sha behind him that if this continues, they're both dead. But Han Sha is already lying almost dead, face down on the ground. He apologizes to Yijun for not being able to help him and for letting him down. Before Yijun can rush to him, he receives a series of shots in the back. He falls to the ground next to Han Sha, who screams and calls his name. The man who shot Yijun in the back stands behind them for quite a while, watching the men. Suddenly, he pulls out another weapon from behind his back, which turns out to be a frying pan. He begins to beat Yijun and Han Sha on the ground with a frying pan, forcing them to fully admit defeat. As a result, the exhausted and beaten men can only lie down and regret what happened. It turns out that all this time Yijun and Han Sha have have been playing a computer game. Yijun is very happy that his friend Han Sha helped him invest in several startups. In gratitude, he decided to give a new apartment to the person who supported him so much. At first, Han Sha refused, assuring Yijun that he did not help him out of self-interest. However, Yijun found a way to change his mind and show his appreciation. The apartment he gave Han Sha was furnished with the latest technology. It had a powerful computer, various game consoles, and slot machines. Such an apartment could not help but win over a man at first sight. Therefore, Han Sha accepted it on the condition that Yijun would continue to live with him. During another game, Yijun tells his friend that he is thinking of going on a trip to America. Han Sha is surprised at the length of his friend's vacation, but it turns out that Yijun has agreed with his boss and extended it. Han Sha doesn't usually get to travel, but he thinks Yijun's idea sounds interesting. Suddenly, a thought comes to his mind that he urgently wants to share with Yijun. He asks his friend to do him a favor, and Yijun agrees without even knowing what it is. Smiling slightly, Han Sha explains that his request is related to Yijun's journey. Yijun regrets agreeing to his friend's request. From the very beginning, he planned just to go on a trip to one of the cities, but now he has a companion, a lovely American named Rose. Yijun can't relax on the bus because Rose uses him as a pillow. Rose is the younger sister of Hench's colleague, and it was he who asked Yijun to take her on the trip. She is 23 years old and has just graduated from college. He asks Yijun to take care of his sister, and Yijun is very embarrassed by this. He is distracted from thoughts of unexpected difficulties by Rose's insistent voice. She leans against the window, very excited that they have reached their destination, which is sunny Los Angeles. A lot of attention is paid to their company as the beautiful Rose attracts people's eyes, but Rose's attention is absorbed by Yijun, who, like herself, found himself in Los Angeles for the first time. Rose is very excited and looking forward to new experiences. Yijun is surprised by the girl's easy attitude to traveling alone with a man. He decides that this is because Rose is American. It is also possible that, due to the fact that the girl is younger than him, she may consider Yijun to be something of an uncle. Noticing that Yijun is deep in his thoughts, Rose actively waves her hand in front of his face. She loudly calls his name, forcing him to listen to her. Yijun is embarrassed that he didn't hear a word and apologizes to an annoyed Rose. The American says that since Yijun has no travel plans, they will follow her schedule. Yijun agrees to everything Rose has come up with for the trip. Rose has already thought out a whole program with a visit to many attractions. For example, they visit the Warner Brothers film studio and take a lot of pictures in various locations. They also go to the pier during sunset. After asking one of the people to take a picture of them, they pose together for a picture as a souvenir. After walking for a day, Yijun and Rose decide to have dinner at a restaurant. They order food and wine to celebrate their trip and raise their glasses in a toast. Rose hopes that Yijun wasn't too embarrassed to take her with him for company, and Yijun replies that he enjoyed spending time with her. He understands that he would not have explored the sights so much on his own. The young people discuss the purpose of Yijun's trip to America, and the man talks about his desire to expand his knowledge and get acquainted with a new culture. Rose says that she wanted to get good memories before getting a job, so she planned the trip. The American studied hard and was able to find a job on Wall Street, and therefore she has the last opportunity to spend time carefree. Yijun is amazed that such a young girl has already been able to find a job on the main financial street of the world. In the wake of such amazing discoveries, Yijun wants to drink another glass. He woos Rose and gallantly fills her glass with wine. He wishes Rose to fulfill her goal of working with really big money and to find and fulfill her dream. Rose listens attentively to Yijun's wishes and smiles contentedly. The two touch glasses, and Yijun expresses his wish to one day turn to Rose as an important financier on Wall Street. After dinner, they check into the hostel where they are staying and are surprised that there is no one else in the room except them. Rose expresses the idea that even in such places there are not always people. She puts her suitcase against the wall and slowly sinks onto her bed. She then looks playfully at Yijun and expresses her joy that they are alone. Yijun shudders at such frank flirtation and freezes in place. His gaze involuntarily slides over the seductive body of the girl, but before his thoughts lead him too far, he coughs embarrassingly and asks her not to joke with him like that to defuse the situation. After a while, they turn off the lights and settle down on a bunk bed, after which Rose wishes Yijun good night from the second tier. He politely wishes her good dreams as well, but he is still excited. Rose's flirtation almost made Yijun's heart jump out of his chest. As an Asian, he was not used to such an overt display of interest, and therefore it was difficult for him to pretend to be calm. He couldn't deny that Rose was a very beautiful girl, but she was the sister of Hench's girlfriend, and he didn't want to get him in trouble. So, he decided to just continue to treat Rose like a travel companion companion and take her to the pool bar the next day. People in bathing suits relaxed both in the water and at the bar. Rose, who came to the bar, attracted many glances because of her beauty. However, she did not pay attention to the people and hurried to approach Yijun, who was resting on a sun lounger. Yijun looked embarrassed at his companion, who, upon approaching him, took off her towel. The girl stayed in a swimsuit, which very favorably emphasized the curves of her body. She leaned closer to an embarrassed Yijun and suggested that he go swimming. The girl actively splashed in the water and easily swam across the pool. Yijun, meanwhile, sat on the side and just immersed his feet in the water. Even emerging from the pool, Rose looked very impressive. She was pleased with the pleasant swim and happily approached Yijun. Yijun told her that he didn't really know how to swim, so he preferred to just rinse his feet lightly. Rose immediately offered to teach Yijun how to swim and pulled him into the water. Yijun tried to refuse and was covered with embarrassment. He understood that if Rose continued to show him signs of attention, he would definitely be carried away by her, so he tried to keep his distance. Yijun still politely tried to refuse and said that he wanted to return to the hotel. Suddenly, 3 guys approached them from behind and rudely discussed Rose's beauty out loud. One of the guys suggested that Rose drop Yijun and play with them. Yijun looked at the guys who were trying to roll up to Rose, who was frowning at this. Suddenly, he noticed that one of the trio was not paying attention to Rose. On the contrary, as soon as he caught Yijun's eye, he winked at him. Yijun was horrified when he realized that they were trying to roll up to him as well. The guys continued to actively call Rose to go with them to the bar. She refused because she already had company, and the guys laughed at it. She told the guys to leave as soon as possible before she called the guards, and this caused them to become aggressive. One of the guys tried to forcibly grab Rose's hand, dissatisfied with her threats. Yijun immediately rushed forward and intercepted his arm, preventing him from touching Rose. He stood in front of Rose and convinced the strangers that they should not touch the girl without her consent. Rose was impressed that Yijun behaved like a true gentleman. She was embarrassed by the feelings that overwhelmed her at the sight of the man's broad back. Meanwhile, Yijun was worried about what to do next because, although he decided to protect the girl, he was not used to fighting. The guys disgruntledly exchanged words with each other and wanted to start a conflict. Though Yijun was still trying to shield Rose with himself, she gently pushed him aside. She calmly and boldly went forward to the strange young men, crossing her arms over her chest. She ordered them to apologize and leave, then they would pretend that nothing happened. The guys didn't understand why they should apologize if they hadn't done anything wrong. Rose was pleased with the answer, but the smile on her lips looked quite threatening. She immediately drew the attention of those who molested them to the person behind their backs. It turned out to be the local guard. He reminded the guys that they had already been warned about the harassment of customers, which was why they would have to move out of the hotel. Several more colleagues joined the guard, and they quickly took the molester away. On this occasion, Yijun and Rose decided to have a cocktail at the bar. They were delighted with the bar and the taste of the drinks, which made the bartender smile contentedly. Coupons for free drinks were given to them as compensation from the hotel. Yijun considered this to be luck, and Rose could not disagree with him. The girl thoughtfully lowered her gaze into the glass with the drink and turned to her companion. She was curious to know more about Yijun and asked him to tell her about himself, his family, and his life in the past. Yijun thought about the answer and said that his mother died early, and he lived for a long time with his father, who loved gambling and ruined them. Eventually, his father died as well. He told the story of how he graduated from college, got a job in a company, and married a woman who worked in a neighboring department. After hearing the story of Yijun and Siwu lives, Rose went into a rage. She called Yijun's ex-wife a witch and scolded her loudly for the pain she caused the man. Yijun did not expect that she would scold his ex, but unexpectedly such a reaction turned out to be pleasant for him. Rose immediately noted that she understood why Maria wanted to marry him. She believed that Yijun listened carefully to a woman's words, respected her, and cared about her. Therefore, based on these thoughts, Rose was sure that it was easy to fall in love with him. Yijun felt embarrassment and a pleasant warmth in his chest from the girl's words. In order not to cross the line established between them, Yijun hurries to end the evening and suggests that they go to their rooms. He wearily collapses on the bed, trying to recover from his time alone with Rose. Yijun lies with his arms outstretched, thinking about everything that has happened. He thinks that he should be more conscious because Rose almost knocked him out of his stride. To distract himself, he decides to check the price of cryptocurrency and pulls out his phone. With displeasure, he notes that the prices of many cryptocurrencies have collapsed. He reflects on how big his losses would have been if he hadn't sold his assets. Suddenly, there is a knock on the door, and Yijun is very surprised to see Rose behind it. Yijun thinks that something has happened to her and hurries to open the door. Behind the door of the hotel room stands Rose in a seductive nightgown. Yijun is speechless from what he sees and stops breathing for a few seconds. He nervously asks the girl what happened since she came to him, but Rose suddenly puts a finger on his lips, telling him to shut up. She enters the room and comes close to Yijun without embarrassment. Rose is seductive and beautiful, so she literally shines in Yijun's eyes. She persuades Yijun to spend the night in the same bed, and when they lie down next to each other, she decides to get his opinion on the trip. This time, they are in Las Vegas, and Yijun liked it much more than he imagined. He liked Santa Monica Beach for the beauty of nature and Las Vegas for the splendor of a noisy city. Rose laughs at his words. She shares Yijun's point of view. The girl suddenly rises on the bed to move closer to Yijun. She rolls over on her stomach and puts her hands under her head, asking the man if just talking at night is enough for him. Yijun mentally prays not to relapse but replies that the night is good and suitable for talking. Rose wonders why Yijun doesn't openly show his sympathy and desire. Yijun thinks that he wants to be honest with her. He replies that he is not sure that he is ready for responsibility after intimacy with a woman. After divorcing his wife, he lost interest in dating, but he knows for sure that he does not want consequences if their meaning is only short-term pleasure. He also gently notes that he doesn't particularly want to hurt Rose. The girl blushes at his confession and feels her breath shorten, but to hide her embarrassment, she accuses Yijun of being rude. Hiding her face in the pillow, she asks the man to talk to her all night. Yijun does not mind, and they begin to share their impressions of the trip together. But in the end, Yijun calmly falls asleep in the process of their conversation. Rose examines the sleeping Yijun and gently touches his face. Then she carefully rolls up to the man's side and hugs him. She feels a little disappointed, but even such a first night in the same bed makes Rose feel happy. In the morning, they pack their things and go to their final destination, New York. Yijun decided to accompany Rose to the city and at the same time see many famous places in New York. He is going to return to Seoul from this city as it is faster than via San Francisco. Yijun asks the girl to take care of herself and wishes her good luck in her life and work. Rose rushes to him and hugs him tightly. She thinks traveling with Yijun was great and asks him to contact her when he gets home. After promising the girl to contact her later, Yijun boards his flight and heads home. Yijun sits on the plane and thinks that the long journey to America has finally come to an end. When he came to the States, he met a lot of interesting and good people, from startup executives to the charming Rose. He was also very impressed by the industry and culture flourishing in every corner of the country, and of course, the huge capital. When Yijun felt this huge economic low, greed and a desire to join it awoke in him. He realizes that he wants to make even more money because it's the most fun thing there can be. When he lands in Seoul, he suddenly realizes that a familiar face is greeting him at the airport. Hanjo arrives at the airport with a nameplate and calls Yijun over. The man is surprised that a colleague came to meet him, and he's not the only one who came to meet Yijun. With a soft smile, Jinna approaches the men, glad that after a while, she finally sees Yijun. Yijun is happy to see her, and Hanjo laughs behind his back at his colleague's reaction. Yijun wonders how Jinna was able to come during office hours, but Jinna replies that she was nearby. The colleagues decide that after Yijun's trip, he will want to have a snack, and the man agrees and takes them to a good restaurant. At that moment, Yijun's phone signals incoming messages from his ex-wife, although he does not pay attention to it. After having a good time with Hanjo and Jinna, Yijun finally comes home. He reflects on the fact that American landscapes are good, but nothing compares to his homeland. Before sorting out his luggage, he decides to check the notifications on his phone. He is happy to hear from who invites him to come to America more often. He smiles at Rose's message in which she talks about a successful interview at a large American company. Rose writes that they will see each other soon, and Yijun is perplexed about the reasons for a possible meeting. Then he draws attention to the number of messages from his ex-wife, Siwoo. Siwoo breaks the comedy and presents herself as a gentle, suffering wife. She writes how sad she is that he left for the States without telling her anything, how much she misses him, and that only after the breakup did she realize the strength of her love for Yijun. Yijun is covered in sweat with horror when he reads these messages. He believes that Siwoo has gone mad. Subsequent messages contain information about gossip within the company, which refers to Yijun losing money on investments. Siwoo writes over and over again, and when she doesn't get an answer, she gets irritated. As a result, she only throws insults and threats at him. In recent messages, Siwoo threatens that Yijun will have a hard time at work. This behavior impresses Yijun, but he immediately blocks all of his ex-wife's phone numbers so that that she can no longer bombard him with messages. He once again admits that the divorce from Siwoo was one of the best events in his life. The next day, he comes to work with full bags of souvenirs for his colleagues and in high spirits. He is alarmed by the fact that the company's employees look extremely sad. He tries to understand what has happened to the atmosphere when several people from his department approach him. They ask Yijun about his vacation experiences and share their own investment success with Yijun's advice. Then Yijun realizes that the reason for the decline in mental strength in the team is unsuccessful investments in cryptocurrency and large financial losses. Suddenly, from behind his back, someone mockingly calls for Yijun, who has returned from vacation. Senior colleagues with whom he has a good relationship, namely the manager and the head of the department, come closer to say hello. Yijun is very happy to see them both after so many days of his absence. He takes them to the meeting room to give them the souvenirs he brought, which are expensive watches. Taking the Rolexes in their hands, the men look at them in shock, afraid to believe in the reality of what is happening. However, the man confirms that they have a branded item in their hands. Yijun expresses his gratitude to the men for their help and understanding during the last years of his work. That's why he wanted to make memorable gifts to the manager and the head of the department. However, the manager suddenly frowns, his face darkening, and sighs heavily. Yijun is surprised by such a strange reaction to his gift. The men begin to make excuses that they cannot accept such an expensive and special gift. Yijun tries to reason with them, telling them not to worry about the price because it doesn't matter much to him. The head of the department, sweating, says that someone is chatting around the office that Yijun has lost his assets. Yijun immediately refutes this information, which surprises and pleases the men. They notice that the rumor has not appeared for the first time. After receiving information about who may be the gossip peddler, Yijun goes to the roof for a break. Almost immediately, James, the colleague who let other employees down in the story with cryptocurrency, rises next, pretending to care about Yijun. James tries to find out if he is doing well financially. Yijun smirks contentedly as he begins to drive the man into his trap. In the past, James had always bullied him and other employees with less experience, so Yijun had a good chance to get revenge. He decides to confirm the rumors spread by James to see where it leads. James always looks down on everyone if they are inferior to him in any way, and for the sake of satisfying his pride, he is ready to harm other people. Yijun knew that he would be angry when he found out about his success, but he didn't think it would be so neglected. James explains his curiosity by his excitement for Yijun and his future. He puts pressure on the man, offering him to freely talk about his problems. Deciding to play along with him in the name of executing his plan, Yijun decides to give James some information. Yijun replies that things are not going well for him, and he did not want to tell anyone, but he can trust James. James immediately beams and begins to convince Yijun that he won't tell anyone. Yijun then gives him information that he has gone broke and has less than 10 million won left in his account, trying his best not to burst out laughing. James feels sorry for Yijun and thanks him for sharing his problems with him. At this point, the trap that Yijun has set closes, and although James promised not to tell anyone about Yijun's situation, he immediately goes to the office premises and starts new rumors. Because of his words, colleagues begin to chat about the fact that Yijun sold his assets and came to collapse. It is not easy for James to keep his face. He is shaking with delight because of the people's disappointment in Yijun. James experiences unprecedented joy. He sees Yijun as nothing more than an annoying caterpillar and wants to trample him. James needs Yijun to remain a step below him for the rest of his life. Suddenly, the employees' chatter is interrupted by one of their colleagues. He announces that a large corporate dinner party will be held this evening. James snorts contemptuously, believing that they will be offered cheap cuisine again, and he is above that. However, in fact, dinner will be at a restaurant famous for Korean beef of the highest quality in all of Gangnam. Of course, such a promise arouses the curiosity of employees. In the expensive restaurant where they come, they are greeted as important people. The company's employees are shocked to doubt that they can be in a place like this. However, they quickly decide that since they were invited, they need to take advantage of the situation. Usually, in such a restaurant, you can only visit a meeting with really rich people, which is why the dishes are more expensive than ordinary employees can afford. James thinks about who could be the one who gathered the employees for a company dinner. Suddenly, to his surprise, Yijun enters the restaurant accompanied by the manager and the head of the department. This annoys James because he sees it as boasting about his closeness to department heads. However, at the same moment, Yijun takes the microphone microphone and announces to everyone that he organized this event. This shocks all colleagues present, except those who were aware of Yijun's plan. Yijun explains that he has no special intentions and this dinner is just a pastime with colleagues. Since he couldn't bring many souvenirs, he decided to order a good dinner for everyone. Yijun's colleagues are shocked by the highest quality meat that the waiters take out. James realizes that the 10 million won that Yijun should have in his account would not be enough for such a dinner. Everyone around begins to whisper about the rumors that James has been spreading. As a result, the idea that James was spreading rumors intentionally still sounds at the table. James responds by aggressively arguing that Yijun told him about his losses. Suddenly, the head of the department raises his voice and, as if casually, says that Yijun does not make mistakes. These words attract the attention of James, who feels ashamed. The head of the department continues that he also lost a lot of money on cryptocurrency, but that's only because he didn't listen to Yijun. Instead, he decided to trust James, who was confident in his words, and now he is spreading rumors about Yijun which are clearly false. This annoys the man. James tries to come up with at least something to justify himself, but the words do not come to mind. Yijun leisurely walks over to his desk and calls the man's name. As before, he wouldn't have paid any attention to James's gossip. He simply had no choice but to put up with it. But now everything had changed. Grinning contentedly, Yijun says that the evening has been prepared especially for James. This, of course, immediately causes James to go into a rage when he realizes that he has fallen into a trap. Colleagues begin to discuss that James blurted out the secret that Yijun entrusted to him, and after that, he sits quietly here. James feels ashamed and angry that he has been trapped and cannot justify himself. Others laugh at his greed because he could not refuse expensive beef, so he came. James's eyes darken more and more, but he can't say a word. Yijun and the head of his department exchange signs of their success with smirks. If you're excited for the next part, leave a comment, and I'll do my best to bring it to you as soon as possible.